In the depths, surrounded by the very foundations of Tyria, a battle was raging. So today we're going to be looking at a blog post called That Old College Try, which was written by Reese Sosby, and it was a part of Asura Week, which I've been slowly recording more of and covering as a part of my backlog for when I start work at the end of the month. Every race week has included an article like this where you get to hear about that specific race from the developers themselves, and it's also sort of intersected with a story. Typically on my channel when I've covered these, which was during the Dungeon series, I've now done all of them. This is the last one. Typically when I've done it, I've read the bit from the developer, then read the bit of the story, then the bit of the developer, and sort of put my own thoughts into it. However, last time we did something like this, I just read the story out flat out and people loved it. So that's what I'm going to be doing here. We're going to have one episode where I just read the story, which I'm going to do for you guys now, and then we'll come back to it tomorrow or whenever the next video goes up when we look at the actual developer comments and I give my own thoughts on the different things they're talking about when it comes to the Asura here. So yeah, for Asura Week there were two stories. I've already done Mr. Sparkles and this is the second one, so I hope you guys enjoy it. I definitely love this story because it talks a little bit about the Asura when they're underground, which is a massive part of the Asuran race, but we never really heard much about it in Guild Wars 1, and the majority of this story takes place with the Asura in their home environment in the depths of the earth. So yeah, let's get started. Impact rocked the narrow passage, sending showers of earth and pebbles scattering along the uneven floor. Screeching, high-pitched sound filled the corridor, shaking more dust loose with every bone-jarring pulse and waver. Flattening his ears close to his neck, Dlixx dashed through the wreckage with his decrystalline etherizer close at hand. "I know you're coming, Dlixx!" a voice shouted from up ahead, barely rising over the din. "I'm a sonographic engineer. Did you think I wouldn't hear you? Ha!" Dlixx saw the wave approaching before it hit him, a wobbly-looking motion in the air that signalled a solid wash of sound. He dove behind a boulder, but the assault struck him even as he leapt for cover. With a waft of terrible, howling, whining cacophony, the sound wave spun him end over end until he slammed against the cavern wall. "Umph," he grunted, but the noise of his protest was lost amid the din. "See that?" the voice shouted again. "Nothing's getting through my sonopath. Whoever holds it is immune to it, and Skrit have delicate ears. You hear me? Delicate!" Dlixx rolled out into the hallway, etherizer pointed, focused and ready. The ball of crystal at its end flared with a strange pinkish gleam, and then a light shot toward the end of the hallway. "Delicate ear!" Oh. The voice faded, and then there was the thud of an unconscious body hitting the stone floor. Seizing his opportunity, Dlixx shoved the etherizer into his belt and raced forward. Leaping over barriers made of stone, debris, and broken furniture, he landed solidly over an unconscious Asuran woman, still twitching a bit from the effects of the etherizer ray. Hanging on her back above her was a half-cooked sonic generator, modified from bits and pieces of an original dredge rig. "If I hadn't had earplugs, that would have killed me. Not bad, Poisey." Dlixx reached up and pulled the Torque Abjura from the sonic generator, deactivating the device. He paused to breathe on the copper-coloured Abjura and polish it against his sleeve as the machine wound down. Once the noise faded, he popped the earplugs out of his ears and smiled. But not good enough. He snapped the Abjura in half and peered inside curiously. "No," Poisey managed, her voice wavery with the after effects of his etherizer. "My sonopath will get me out of here. I don't want to die." "I'm not taking your gadget." Dlixx pushed the Abjura into Poisey's pocket. "I came to get something else." Carefully, Dlixx reached down and removed her left shoe. With cautious hands, he tucked it away into his knapsack. Pausing to stare at her, he bent down a second time and also took the long scarf Poisey wore around her neck. "This too, I think," Dlixx muttered. "Why couldn't you leave me alone?" Poisey moaned, her eyes rolling in half-conscious annoyance. "Just go away." Dlixx stood, drawing his coat close around his body. "You're a member of my crew, Poisey," he snarled. "Did you expect me to forget that?" With a dismissive snort, he turned, drew his decrystalline etherizer into his hand once more, and vanished away into the dark passages of the earth. Earth rumbled and moved, displacing itself, churning in ever-growing spirals of shattered stone. Behind the gyratic earth carver, Nim pushed and grunted, struggling to shove the implement more quickly through the wall. It was larger than he, coiled to a point at the fore and flat at the rear like the stylized claw of some giant beast, or like that massive tooth the idiot Norn worshipped up in the frozen mountains. Nim scowled, shoving with all his might as the cone-shaped digging device rolled and rocked and did its work. With each shove, the earth carver dug forward and Nim crawled after, not caring if the passage behind him was half sealed with rubble in his wake. That would be a defense against anything sneaking up behind him. A genius idea! Foo on the rest of them, those idiots in that cog-cursed crew. He was getting himself out. A shudder rippled through the ground, shaking Nim so badly that it tilted his trajectory 3 degrees to the south. He cursed and quickly flipped the earth carver off to investigate. Had he overloaded the joint welders? Flooded the arc analog? Nothing. Maybe the problem was with the talismanic stabilizer. Another shudder. That one definitely wasn't caused by his machine. Nim pushed his goggles up to his forehead, listening carefully, his black eyes narrowing against the single clean strip of skin across his face. Poisy's stupid sonopath, he guessed. Idiot. She'll just draw attention. Better to sneak along and not be noticed. Turning the earth carver on again, Nim put his shoulder to the rear harness and shoved with all his might. With a mighty effort, he drove the spinning drill through the next layer of rock. As the stone cracked and fell apart, Nim cheered, only to turn his cry into a scream as the rock, earth carver and all, suddenly tipped forward with a burst of unimpeded speed. No! He screamed, grabbing for the handles on the rear of the machine. A cavern! My calculations must have been off. I should still be in pyromorphic stone! The sound of chittering rose and swelled beyond the opening as the ground crumbled beneath him, threatening to collapse completely. Forced to release the handles to save his own life, Nim scrambled backwards, but found himself quickly trapped by the rubble he'd left in his wake. Thick cracks splintered the foundation, and Nim saw his fate spread out before him, a blanket of thousands of skrit, and all of the little monsters were staring up at the fresh new hole in their city wall. Across the big cavern, Nim could see the twinkle of daylight, a way out. But he'd never get there. Even if he didn't fall to his doom, there were easily 1,000 rodent men in the way. The stone cracked and groaned, just as the last shards of rock holding him up collapsed. A rope, no, a scarf, flumped down to hang in the air beside him. Poisy! Nim gasped, reaching for it with joy. He clung desperately to the thin thread of hope as the earth carver toppled down to shatter on the floor of the Skrit City cave. Poisy! Nim scrambled up the scarf to a ledge further up the wall. Crawling over the lip, he faced the Asura there with glee. You saved me! I knew that being on the same crew still meant something to you, Poisy. With a gasp, Nim froze. You! Dlixx smiled, levelling the decrystalline etherizer. If I shoot you with this, you'll topple down into our vicious little friends. You know how clever they are when they're all bunched up like that. And there's never been as many of them together as there are here in Skitsburg, I'll wager. Slowly, Nim raised his hands in a gesture of submission. Master Boyk didn't know what he was doing coming down here. We don't have to end up like him. I'm afraid we do. Now, give me your shoe and I'll be on my way. Gulping, Nim shook his head. I won't help you. Whatever you're doing, you won't get away with it, Dlixx. One of us will make it to the surface. One of us already has. With that, Dlixx pulled the trigger and the ball of crystal flared. Nim's body tensed, arcing, but at the last moment, Dlixx grabbed the other Asura by the belt and jerked him away from the open height. Below, 1,000 bright eyes flashed viciously in the darkness, and 1,000 hissing whispers echoed against the stone. Leaning Nim's unconscious body safely against the cavern wall, Dlixx slid off Nim's left shoe and shoved it into his belt bag with the one he'd taken from Poisy. Only one member of the crew left, he muttered, checking a tracking light on his bracer. No time to waste. Tick, tick, tick. Vola knelt by the spherical hydrocadabric distillery, pushing her long, coiled braids back as she tweaked the dials and reset the Asura transversers. She hummed to herself, her body swaying back and forth as she checked and double-checked, each one with the remote in her hand to be certain it was just right. Dlixx's hand squeezed tightly on the handle of his decrystalline aetheriter. The bomb was complete, pre-triggered, and she'd used more than enough crystalline pyretics to level the entire layer. But he was in luck. She'd left her boots on the table near the door. 10? 10? No, this one goes to 11. There we are, she grinned, showing long rows of razor-sharp teeth. All right, Vola, Dlixx called out from the hidden aperture in the floor of the subterranean cavern, keeping his tone smooth and overly gentle. Stand up slowly, back away, toward me, and keep your hands in the air. She spun, far more quickly than he thought was safe, and Dlixx winced. That distillery was explosive, by the alchemy. Dlixx, she squealed delightedly, shoving the remote into her vest. I thought you were dead! What's his name? Master Boyk, he supplied grimly. No, Boyk's just fine. He used a personal transporter the moment we stumbled onto the script city. Personal transporter? Vola mused, rocking back and forth on the balls of her feet. Her coiled braids swayed gently around well-shaped and smoothly moving ears. That's a snaff device, isn't it? Humph, Boyk was always such an idea thief. She raised a hand and stroked her ears lightly, letting the tips of her fingers press gently over her delightfully wide forehead. Eyes on the prize, Dlixx, he snarled to himself, trying not to let her know he'd been staring. Too late. Vola winked. Come on, Dlixx. You know full well it's every Asura for herself down here. She took a winsome step toward him, and he could smell the intoxicating aroma of fuel oil and particulate ozone. I could take you with me, if you like. We were on the same crew, after all. Shaking himself out of it, he raised his aetheriter again with a snap. We were, but if I let you set off that distillery, we'll be on the same dead crew. Come on, climb on top of it with me. I've set up a jail platform. She took another step towards him, her eyes brilliant and filled with 1,000 complex mathematical equations. A force bubble will surround us. The distillery will go off, and we'll be shot straight up to the surface without so much as a scuffle on your broad, another step, cosmonetic, another step, and now her lips were inches from his, toolbox. With a swift movement, Vola snatched the aetheriter out of his hand and stepped back. Fool, she said victoriously. I win! There was only room for one on that jail platform. Wasn't there, Vola? Dlixx asked sadly as she backed away, still holding the weapon fiercely towards his face. You never even considered taking anyone else along. When you set off that distillery, it will collapse the caverns. If the script don't kill us, your bomb will. Like I care, she snapped. I'm the genius here. Me, not you, and not those other simpletons. When I get back to Ratasum, I'll tell them how bravely you and all the others died when we discovered this massive infestation. And I'll be sure to explain to Master Boyk that it's in his best interest to give me the credit, or I'll ruin the Witherbrain for not realising the rats were here in the first place. Still holding his aetheriter, she grinned and leapt to the distillery platform as if she was standing atop the world. Now, all I have to do is press the button on my remote. Vola fumbled in her vest. This remote? Dlixx held it up. You! She levelled the aetheriter and fired, and a lovely mist of lavender-scented vapour shot out, perfuming the room. Give me that back! I can't set off the distillery without it, she wailed. As pleasantly scented smoke filled the area, Dlixx yelled, You never could tell the difference between a decrystalline aetheriter and a decrystalline aetherizer, Vola. Taking advantage of the mist and the distance between them, Dlixx snatched one of Vola's boots from the table and dropped down through the aperture, fleeing into the caverns below. Dlixx crouched at the base of the golem, slowly inserting each shoe into its canopic non-abstract analysation bay. 4 shoes in all. One from each member of his crew, followed by his own, slid down the gullet of the mighty, if roughly hewn, stone defender. Processing, the golem chirruped, his voice bubbling up, raw and scratchy, from the gleaming crystal epicenter. Processing. Understood. Targets acquired. Dlixx stood up and patted the golem with a wide smile, wincing only slightly as his affectionate tap caused a shingle of stone to fall off. He quickly reattached it. Come on, BEMM, time to show us your stuff, Dlixx said, the golem stepping forward, its massive armaments aglow in the dimness of the underground. By the time they burst out into the main script cavern, it was already a free-for-all. The war golem's crystals flashed and shimmered, bolts flying in every direction. It was a rabid explosion of destruction, uncontrolled and completely unhampered by any attempt at silly things like aiming or conservation of energy. On the ledge above, Poisey and Nim screamed. Bolts flew through them, striking them solidly, but where Skrit toppled over, steaming and squirming, the two Asura suffered no damage at all. "What's going on?" Nim howled, curling his hands around his goggles. "How's he doing that?" Poisey pointed to the entrance where Dlixx and BEMM stood. The war golem's arms spun wildly as rays radiated through the mass of the Skrit. "I don't care, just run!" Using her scarf to slide down into the huge cavern, Poisey and Nim fled past the terrified, twitching ratfolk. Within moments, Dlixx saw them climb up the far wall and through the opening, into the sunlight above. "So that's why you needed the shoes," Vola murmured behind him. Her voice sent shivers up his spine, even more than the howling and shrieking of the rodent men. "They've got our sweat in them. You use that matter, part of ourselves, to attune the golem's rays so it wouldn't hurt us." Inspired. Dlixx shot her a glance, but did not answer, a smarmy grin curling his lips. "You could have gotten out any time," she pressed, stepping closer as pinkish rays flew all around them. "Why? Why help us? Because we were all on Master Boyk's crew?" "You don't stop being on a crew till the job's done. The job was to come down here, measure the resonant spell power, and then return. We hadn't returned," Dlixx said and shrugged. "Crew is crew." "Was that your only reason?" "That," he agreed, "and the fact that now every single one of you will be forced to praise the Asura whose invention saved your lives." He puffed up, spinning his decrystalline etherizer around one finger with an expert touch. "Dlixx, inventor of the better mousetrap mass trauma war golem, graduate of the College of Dynamics, bane of Skrit everywhere. Me." And there you go, guys. Hopefully, once again, the Asura voices didn't piss you off too much. I swear to God, ArenaNet, the way that they write these script stories where they just invent so many horrible words is just ridiculous. But anyway, there you go. I love that story. I love most of the stories, to be honest, when I start reading them. If you guys really like this, then please do let me know. If there's going to be any other stories, it's probably in my plans to read those out as well. Especially when Guild Wars 2 is actually out. You know, I wouldn't put past me to do a series where if we do still get these in-game books and they're of the same kind of quality as these in the blog post, hell yes, you can probably expect I'll be reading those. I mean, if you like it, do let me know. And as I said, tomorrow we'll actually be reading all the developer comments that are in the same article, and I'll be discussing my own thoughts on the Asura as a race. And you'll find that the stuff the developers talk about in this same article will probably explain a lot of the topics that were raised in this same story. So if you were listening to something and thinking, wait, what's the script, what's this, what's that, you'll probably find that tomorrow the actual article itself goes into more detail about it. So yeah, thanks very much for watching, guys, and I guess I'll see you tomorrow. See you later.